Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of the Memories of Plymouth. This is our 5th year that we have been bringing some of the folks from Plymouth and the surrounding towns in so they can share their stories. Some of these folks were born here, brought up here, educated here. Some have been here for 50, 60, and 70 years. For me, this is an important project because it describes for us how important a community is. The stories that we're going to be sharing with you in the future and the same as today. Our special guest that we have with us today is Mr. Gunnar Ives Baldwin. Did I do it okay?
Yes.
So welcome. So in the next hour, we're going to learn a little bit about his family, a little bit about his life here, and I think the value of the stories that he's going to be sharing hopefully will resonate with our audience, and you will think about joining us. We have participants for the year 2021. We are already working on 2022. So, are you ready to begin?
Sure.
All right. Your full name?
Gunnar Ives Baldwin.
And it's intrigued me, your middle name.
Okay. My first name is Swedish because my mother is Swedish, and my mother and father were married in Sweden and had a very good friend named Gunnar. Very common Swedish name. My middle name, Ives, was my American grandmother's, paternal grandmother's last name. The Ives family and the Baldwin family really settled in Connecticut way back in the 1600s.
Wow.
And there are many pages of Ives and Baldwins in any Connecticut phone book. So that's where that comes from. And my father's middle name was Ives also.
All right. Anyone in your family named Ives?
No. Nope.
That was short. Okay, let's move on. You have siblings?
I sure do. I'm the youngest of 4. My oldest sister, who's 93, I think, is in Germantown, Maryland. My second sister, Harriet, died a few years ago, and she had lived mostly in Princeton, New Jersey, and is well known there for helping the senior housing. And then my brother, who's still alive, is an architect in Hastings-on-Hudson in New York. He's well known for designing the CN Tower in Toronto. It's known as a tower specialist, did towers all around the world. He's still practicing at 87.
So, and you're the baby.
I'm the baby. Yep, I'm the youngest of 4.
And I have to ask, either tell us your age or if you would prefer when you were born, and you let the audience figure that one out.
Well, I'm 84, just 84. I was born in May.
All right. Good. And you are married?
I am married to a wonderful lady named Heather. We were married in 1973 and have lived in Thornton ever since.
Wow.
I should mention that she had been previously married as well as I had been previously married.
So you're a blended family?
We have 7 children who are from other spouses and 1 that we've had together.
How do you keep track? There's so many.
You know, that's easy when you live with them all the time. But we call our youngest one the keystone of the family because she keeps both sides of the family together.
That's neat. That is neat. You were born in 1937. And maybe I should have switched this around, but knowing how active you are today, go backwards a little bit if you can, and tell me some of the, listen to this, jobs you had when you were a child. Jobs, that's my audience.
Well, being the son of a forester, I was given a lot of small jobs, like pruning plantations of new trees, and we had a charcoal making operation at Fox Forest in Hillsborough, where I grew up, and bagging charcoal was one of the jobs, which is a black job. Very, very, shall we say, messy. And we had an old fellow there that was supervised it, and my brother and I were often the baggers, and the dust from charcoal was everywhere.
I want to see how many children are putting their hands up to do the same job today.
I doubt it. There aren't very many charcoal making operations today. My father did it as a demonstration for landowners to make use of their shall we say, weed trees that were taken out to practice good forestry.
You used to mow lawns as a child in Dublin?
Yes, I had a very wonderful job for well, I call him older man. He was probably in his 50s, but and he had a wonderful little corgi dog that I fell in love with named Trisket. And I used to bike about 15, 16 miles from Hillsborough Center over to Dublin to mow his lawn and weed his shrubs and whatever, and back again at night. And I did it because I really wanted to go and play with Trisket.
That's cute.
That's
cute.
So needless to say, when Heather and I when we first got a dog, it was a Welsh Corgi, and we named it Trisket.
I want to talk a little bit about your education if I can, but before that, what was the distance from your home to school, elementary?
Well, Fox Forest, where I grew up, is about 1.5 miles downhill from Hillsborough Center School, where I went to grade school, at least part of the time. But we walked up, or we bicycled up, or we skied up in the winter. And then we got a good ski down, or a good coast down at the end of the day.
So were there buses at the time to take you to school? No.
No.
All right, that's a good one. Education? You've had a variety of
experiences? After my many short stays at various elementary schools around the country, because my father was in the Army and Army Air Force, and my mother followed from one base to another base. And so I changed school like every 2 weeks for several years, and so I don't really remember all the schools that I went to.
We won't go there.
But then when we finally, that ended, I spent 3 years at the public school in Hillsborough, and then dropped back a grade. I'd advanced a grade in second grade, which was a big mistake. Never do it to a child. And I fell back a grade and went to St. Paul's School in Concord, where my parents had good friends, and I loved St. Paul's School.
And why so, please?
It provided it's the foundation of my moral education. I still remember and use the school prayer often. Grant, O Lord, that in all the joys of life we may never forget to be kind. Help us to be unselfish in friendship, thoughtful of those less happy than ourselves, and eager to bear the burdens of others.
Great message.
That message stayed with me through the rest of my life. Of course, having friends, I'd grown up in the country and had no friends, no playmates, and so suddenly having all these playmates, at age 14 is the wrong word, but that was a big change for me, and I just loved it. I loved the athletics. I learned to row, and that carried through the next 50 years of my life.
We'll hear more about that. That sounds good. Keep going.
After St. Paul's, I like to tell my kids, I didn't apply to Yale, I was sent to Yale. My, my father had been at Yale, my grandfather had been at Yale. I think I was 9th generation Yale. And so I don't remember applying or filling out any application. Things have changed since then. Huge change. I would never get into Yale today. And I think it was my St. Paul school education that did that. At Yale, all I wanted to do was row. I went there, I agreed to go there, I would say, because they had the best crew in the country. And the varsity had just won the Olympics in Melbourne, Australia. And it was my dream that maybe I could get good enough and by training for all those years to maybe try out for the Olympics in 1960.
Did you work toward that?
I certainly did. And every summer I had jobs that allowed me to row on the side, and get trained, get coached, and in a single scull.
Is there a difference between rowing and crew for the audience?
Well, crew is considered 8-oared sweep rowing or 4-oared sweep rowing. That means each person has one oar. Sculling, which is included in crew or in rowing, is you have a very small boat, very narrow, long, skinny boat with 2 oars and a sliding seat. Sculling is what fascinated me, and as a crew coach for 40 years, I always believed that starting out in a single scull was the best way.
I won't tell the audience I had to look up the difference last night before the interview.
Oh.
Like I thought they might want to know. They might want to know. And after Yale?
Well, after Yale, having ignored the concept that maybe I need to prepare myself for future work, I decided teaching was a great option because it allowed me to keep rowing, and I could coach crew, and which I'd started at Yale. I'd coached the freshman crew at Yale my senior year, and so that's what persuaded me to go into teaching. I discovered after 2 years of teaching elementary school at a private school in Boston, Brown and Nichols School, that really I loved mathematics. I had enjoyed mathematics at St. Paul's until my senior year when it got sort of abstract, and then I turned it off. And so I decided I'd better get educated in mathematics. I'd better go back and take the major that I should have had at Yale. Fortunately, at the time, there was a Sputnik program. The Sputnik had motivated the National Science Foundation to give grants to trained teachers in mathematics. Sort of the beginning of the STEM era. And so I got one of those and went to Penn State in State College, Pennsylvania for 2 years and took all the courses needed to fulfill a major. Didn't get a degree, but I got the major satisfied, and that enabled me to apply to Brown University in Providence to get a master's in mathematics and teaching.
And then where do we go from there?
Well, at that time, after graduating, getting that degree, I decided we'd moved around enough. I had been married, and we had 3 children and a 4th on the way, and so I didn't want to move again. And so I took a wonderful job at Moses Brown School in Providence, teaching mathematics. And in fact, I was the first math teacher in the country, I believe, to have a computer terminal in his classroom.
What year would that be?
That was in 1964. And Mr. Watson was the chairman of the board of IBM and also the chairman of the board of Brown University. and he wanted to have to try putting a terminal in a mathematics classroom, and I agreed. The other teachers didn't speak up, so I went and got a summer course in basic computer programming language called BASIC. Brown called it Bruin, but it was really the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I loved it, and it got very exciting to see the boys around the clock would sign up for using the terminal. I had a sign-up sheet, and they'd filled up hours from 2 to 3 in the morning. It was that popular. And they also allowed me to start a crew at Moses Brown, so I got to coach crew as well as SCO on the side. And in fact, while SCOing there, I entered the first head of the Charles Regatta, and as I guess I was a master at that point. And all my boys came and watched it. It was sort of the highlight of my rowing career. And then things turned bad on the personal front, and my marriage got very difficult, and my wife moved to Hanover, New Hampshire, and a year later I was divorced.
That's not how you got to Thornton.
No, I got to Thornton because while married to my first wife, I had come to New Hampshire frequently with my outing club boys from Moses Brown, and camped and hiked and skied in the White Mountains. And I got very interested in, buying a piece of land so that I could bring the kids up to my piece of land and be able to camp there. And just one Columbus Day weekend in 1965, I came up and went to the Strout Realty fellow in Plymouth, and he gave me a 3-page list of single-space list of abandoned farms in this area. I looked at them, I plotted them on the map, and the ones that were along Route 3, then north-south, this was well before 93 was built. And the one in Thornton Gorge really stuck out, so I went to see it, among a few others, which I didn't consider. But I got there, and the current owners were very anxious to sell. They wanted to go to Florida. They'd been there 20 years.
Did they not care for our weather, winter?
They never, I don't think they were in tune to our climate up here. But anyway, I asked him if I could walk the boundaries and see where the corners were, and he had no idea where they were. He said, well, I hear that there's a big rock down by the brook that is near one of the corners. It's on the National Forest, but just over the line. And I said, well, can I go down and walk down and see it? And so I walked down, and there's this gorgeous pool, about 50 feet across, 6 feet deep, right next to this house-sized boulder covered with moss with a big tree growing on top of it.
Sounds great.
And it's in the National Forest, but only 50 feet away from the boundary. And it was standing on a rock in the middle of that stream, looking at the leaves. This was in October, and the bright leaves had sunk to the bottom, and the sun was coming in. And I still call that rock Decision Rock, because that's where I said, we have to buy this. This is perfect. And so he was asking $14,000 for the 61 acres of land. And
Want to say that one more time? $14,000 for 61 acres.
He wanted that much money for 61 acres and this old farmhouse, which I didn't want. And I was making $3,900 at Moses Brown School, and I thought to myself, maybe that's just too much. My wife, first wife, then said, "Oh well, we can come up with it." She had money, and so we offered him $12,000 for it, and they took it like that. And we signed. We closed the next weekend.
Now in reflection,
and
honest to
they
goodness.
left the house with all the junk in it, and which was horrible. I considered it a tear down, but a couple of weeks later I brought a whole couple carloads of Moses Brown Outing Club boys up, and we threw all the junk out the windows and had another crew loading them into a big Ryder truck, which we took to the dump. It took 2 big loads to the dump. And then it became the Moses Brown Outing Club Lodge in the White Mountains. And it really wasn't that bad after we got it all cleaned out and gutted and so on. But my first wife did not like being there. It was primitive. And she had a new house built across the road with a beautiful view. And never went there. I think she might have come up once to see it. Anyway, after we were separated, it became mine with the idea that it would be, if I sold it, it would go to my children, which I didn't want to look like I wanted any part of it. So that's why we're there. When Heather and I were married, we had this house in Thornton, and had nowhere else to live, and I couldn't sell it, so we stayed.
But you were used to the area because as a boy, did not your parents bring you to
my father,
Cannon Mountain?
My father brought us to the White Mountains, all the time. He was a big skier, one of the pioneers of skiing.
Wow.
Part of the Hochgebirge.
Say that again?
The Hochgebirge is a ski club that had a race on the Taft slalom, on the Taft downhill trail, which is now part of Mittersill. And there were about 20 of these men who were real pioneers in the ski world. And so I sort of witnessed all of that and was taught to ski before I remember. So that was a big part. And he was also a mountaineer, rock climber, hiker, and we did a lot of hiking in the White Mountains with him.
Would you say that type of support growing up, is that part of your family now?
Absolutely. I would say, I certainly took my kids, especially the older ones, on many hikes as little children. I got very busy with our 2 families put together. I was not only busy caring for them, but trying to support them, which was very, very difficult on a teacher's salary. Which leads me to the next phase of my life, which was first starting a small business on the side while I was teaching, basically selling very water efficient products. I was very concerned about the quality of water in the lakes. I had seen a aerial photo taken with an infrared camera showing little pink dots all around the lake where the septic systems from the camps on the lake fed in, and they could see the changes. That convinced me that the immediate solution, or not solution, but the way to curtail that problem was to reduce the amount of water use. And so anything I could sell that would cut back on water use seemed to fit into the picture. So I got very interested in very low consumption water closets, toilets. I found a toilet that was used on trains in California, which only used half a gallon. And at the time, the norm was 5 to 7 gallons per flush, which is a huge amount of water. And so I got a couple of these, and they immediately cleared up our septic problem. We had a septic system that was, with 10 people in the house. The ground was wet over the leach field, and it wasn't an old system, it was just overused. We took out 2 5-gallon toilets and put in these half-gallon toilets, and it immediately cleared it up, which also convinced me that water conservation or water efficient plumbing really had a major role in curtailing pollution.
And this was when? A reminder of the date?
This was in the late 1970s. At that time, I mean, nobody was thinking about this at all, and I was desperately trying to make a living at the same time, and I also had this very strong belief that if we could really cut back on the water use, we could solve a lot of the septic problems in the country, and we could solve city problems where they were having huge problems. I'll never forget Mayor Dukakis giving a speech and holding up this bottle of lousy-looking water from Boston Harbor and saying, we've got to fix this, and he publicized this whole thing. And problems in polluted harbors and rivers were everywhere. The whole East Coast had terrible problems. You couldn't swim on Long Island because the beaches were polluted from the water coming out of the Hudson, which came directly out of the sewage
Well, we had the
treatment
same
plants.
thing here.
The
Pemi.
Yeah,
People would put their trash there every night.
I remember when we first came to Thornton that the pipes from the houses in North Woodstock and Lincoln went straight into the river.
Here we go.
They didn't have septic tanks. It was just straight discharge into the river, which was considered the way to get rid of it. Out of sight, out of mind. And so I got sort of to be a what do you call it, a proselyte or whatever about this subject, and preached the subject to some people's dismay. The plumbers, the other manufacturers of traditional plumbing, hated this guy Baldwin, who was raising these problems with what their business was about. I remember a Kohler company spent $2 million on a PR campaign to try to raise questions about low-flow toilets, and that any changes to the code ought to be postponed and this kind of thing. Well, the end of the story is we won. And I had persuaded Toto, the largest plumbing manufacturer in the world, from Japan to make me a 1.6 gallon or 6 liter toilet.
How did you get that vision to make a communication with them?
Well, the company that sold the half-gallon toilet that I was trying to sell, which was air-operated, required putting in an air compressor, and it had a lot of other problems too, it made it really difficult to sell, except in very extreme cases. And so I had talked them into, I was the president of Microfor, who was getting their China product, the China portion of their product, from Toto, in return selling their valves to Toto in Japan for their trains in Japan. So he had this relationship with Toto, and I persuaded him that we should try to get Toto to make us a 1.6 gallon toilet to compete with the Swedish toilets that were coming in. Sweden had a 1.6 or 6 liter code starting in '72, and which meant they had 20 years experience with it, and their products worked fine, but they were different. They didn't look like American toilets. They had very small water spots. They had little knobs you have to lift up instead of putting a handle. So they weren't conventional, and so the marketing, their marketing was a little difficult. The Toto toilet that I first got was more American style, and it had been engineered beyond belief. It worked supremely well. It was the first toilet that ever got a perfect score on the tests for the ANSI standard performance test. And so it was a big hit. And when it finally came in 1987, it was a major success. We sold out immediately, and I couldn't get enough of them.
You are now part of this.
Now I was with Microfor still, importing from Toto, and I managed to persuade the Toto that they needed to come over here and set up a
company
subsidiary in the U.S., which they did in 1990. So I became their first American employee at that point. Then they decided that we didn't have enough products. They bought a plant in Atlanta, an old plant, and reconditioned it, put millions of dollars into rebuilding it, and within 6 months its product was sold out. At which point they decided, well, we need to make a major investment. And they built the plant in Morrow, Georgia, which is, I think, still the largest pottery plant in the country, if not the world. And it produces very high-end, very highly engineered products. And that's sort of where my story ends. At that point, they developed a huge sales organization. I was sort of the grandfather of all these salesmen and would go around training them, and I was more interested in green building and the green building standards and so my job changed from sales to training. I was their senior trainer. I'm getting way off the subject.
No, it's very interesting. It's just amazing the vision that you had for how it came to be. You needed a job.
Well, it was, and I think that story really, I didn't tell you before, but the kitchen and bath industry, which plumbing is part of, has an association, the National Kitchen and Bath Association. And the story really attracted their attention and gave them the idea to induct me into their Hall of Fame in 2015. My wife makes a joke of that. She thinks it's the Toilet Hall of Fame, but it was the National Kitchen and Bath Hall of Fame. So
be very clear, dear.
I got recognized, and I'm happy about that. But really, it was the company, the expertise, the engineering that went in there. Toto has 1,500 R&D engineers,
Wow.
and they did an incredible job.
But you're still in Thornton.
Still in Thornton.
And what kept you living here all these years? We know what lured you a little bit, yes, but...
Well, when I went to work for Toto, when they asked me to come to work for them in 1990, I said, well, I'd love to, but there are a couple things that you have to agree to. One, I live in Thornton, New Hampshire. Number two, my family comes first. If there's an issue in the business that I'm needed for, or if there's an issue at home, the home issue comes first.
Nice.
And that was made very clear. It exempted me from any advancement into management, which I didn't really care for anyway. So I was happy with that. And I balanced the success in the business with my ability to stay home and take care of my family. So, but I did a lot of traveling after they were out of school and in college or away at school.
And Heather took care of all of them.
And Heather was busy here. She taught at the university and was busy, and they were gone.
You were gone by that time. Let's see. In the last year, oh my goodness, look where we are. New Hampshire's TV program, Chronicle. They scooped you up.
Well, when you're father of 8 children in the country, and you're not near anybody, you don't want to be carting your kids or being the soccer mom image, going to other places. You are the center of things, and my family was the center of things for a lot of their friends, and I wanted to keep it that way, and I wanted to create an environment for my kids that kept them home. So we'd meet their friends, we'd know who their friends were, and that was the way it needed to be. So the thing I've become known for is my development of what we've called a luge, which really is the name of a Olympic event with it's an icy slide that you go down on sleds. Mm-hmm. Well, we called it a luge because I built this track, and the kids would slide down it in the beginning with anything they could find, but they would stay in the track, which had bank turns and was deep enough so they wouldn't come out. And so it protected them from the trees, and it protected them from falling, but it also was a lot of fun because it had big turns. And, well, they discovered that, in finding things to slide on, they discovered that they could use the tubes that we used in the summer for going down the river. And we had a big collection of various sized tubes, and they would try them out on the luge track. So I decided, well, I better make the luge track a little wider and bigger to accommodate these tubes, because they were having a lot of fun in the tubes. And they'd put the tubes in trains by putting their feet up underneath the shoulders of the one in front. And the trains would stay together and go down the luge and at a faster clip, creating a lot of momentum, and it was just a lot of fun. I think that the use of tubes really probably started were discovered by my kids in Thornton Gore.
Did you hear that, everybody?
Yeah, well, I've made
it.
I've made that is not a claim, it's a statement. And what I say is, I'd be happy to be proved otherwise by somebody providing a video of kids sliding in tubes in a train going down a track somewhere else. It got very popular, and a lot of their kids, my kids' friends from the area, came and slid. My ski team at the Linwood High School would come and slide too. So a lot of kids enjoyed that luge. I had 4 seniors in the high school at one point, because we had a visiting girl whose parents had left to go, been transferred. Her father had been transferred to a base in Florida. And she didn't want to miss her senior year with her friends, so we invited her to stay with us, and she had a sort of a sister with one of my daughters. And then we had a Norwegian AFS student living with us. So we had 4 seniors at the Plymouth High School. And they came to me, this was about 1981, I think, something like that. And they came to me and asked if they could have a class party on the luge. And I thought to myself, well, you know, sounds like a lot of fun. I can see why they'd want to do that, bring all their friends up and have. So I said yes, and they planned this, and it was right in the middle of luge season in February. It ended up we had 150 high school seniors. I don't think anybody in that class missed it. So it was a class party. We had also invited several parents, and they came too. And we had a band. One of the older sons was in a band, and he came, and we gutted our living room, opened the doors to the deck where the luge started. Wow. And had the band playing, and they started sliding at 4:30 when they came out of school, and they were still sliding at midnight, screaming, just having a wonderful time. Wonderful. We'd hired an off-duty policeman to come and be at the party just for, the sake of it. And he said later, he had never seen any kids having more fun and getting more high on just delight. And he didn't see any alcohol or drugs or any hint of anything that was not good.
What a great memory. What a great memory for your children and all those.
That party, it was remembered by a lot of people. I did notice that, because I was teaching skiing at Waterville Valley at the time, I did notice a couple years after the party that somebody developed a tubing run near the bottom of one of the trails there. And that tubing run, and one of the boys who'd been at the party was a groomer, running the groom.
Why not?
So I get I got the hint, and Loon had also started one too, and I sort of got the hint that somebody somewhere had given them the idea. Probably somebody had been at that party, but that's just a guess, and I'll remain to be corrected if somebody can provide proof.
Boy, we're going to have calls after this. Do you think?
Yeah, right.
But what a great memory for your family, and that you have other traditions too.
Well, we do. Living where we did, the kids on Halloween could not go trick or treating. There was nobody to do it. So, and we tried driving them up to Lincoln or North Woodstock, but they didn't know the kids there, they didn't know the families there, so that didn't work. So I decided we'd make our own little trick-or-treat tradition. And we had lots of pumpkins. We had a garden, and we grew lots of pumpkins, and I had them carve jack-o'-lanterns, which they did in huge numbers. It was always a contest to see who could have the best one. And I would, on Halloween or someday near there, I would set up this course that they could go around along a trail, and I'd put a pumpkin a jack-o'-lantern about every couple hundred yards. And I'd go out before it started and light the candles and place a bag with a trick or a treat in it. And we had a lot of fun figuring out tricks, little bags of unpleasant things like rotten squash or moose scats or whatever that they'd find. And every other one was a treat, which was a bag of candy or something. Well, it got to be quite popular. They would invite their friends to come too. And the older ones got to be interested in helping me produce this whole extravaganza. because that included going out in the woods and making owl calls and making, you know, flying ghosts, a hanger with a sheet on it sliding down, or a white shirt sliding down a wire, or things like that. Yeah. And so it got to be quite a thing, and it's continued, and now my youngest daughter does it regularly, and now they've moved it back to our place, so they have their pumpkin hunt party. It's not just a pumpkin hunt anymore. It's a band playing, and it's a costume party and fireworks, and so it's.
You have memory after memory after memory for the kids.
It grew, and these things, you start things, and because there's a natural tendency in human beings, I think, to need to make things better. If you start something, it has to get better every year you do it. Otherwise, you failed.
Mm-hmm. I would be nice if everybody thought that way, but I think a lot of people do. A lot of people do. Let's do the best we can. Yeah. These are new questions for me, so pass them by. If people were to describe you, Gunnar, what might come to their mind? And that's a toughie.
Yeah, it's a toughie. I've heard feedback from my older children, that I'm very proud of, proud to hear. And one especially came from my stepson, Sam, who was a contractor, and I respect him greatly. He said, well, honesty is something I learned from Pop. And that makes me, when I heard that, it made me very proud, if that could be carried on. I think, I hope to be looked at as someone that was always trusted and honest and also loving. I loved all of my kids, all 8 of them. We don't consider them stepchildren or half-children or whatever. It's been a very close family, and that makes me very proud.
Very lucky. Mm-hmm. Thank you for answering that. Was there a person in your town, we're talking about Thornton in the area, who might have influenced you? Could have been upon your arrival or over time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we first settled, Heather had run into Mr. Lester Saborn, who ran the Saborn's General Store in Woodstock. That was the closest store to where we live. It's not open anymore. But old Mr. Saborn was a wonderful character, and he was very helpful. He lived up along Thornton Gore Road, and he had a wonderful garden, and he had all kinds of stories to tell.
Storyteller?
And we listened to him, and we just, loved his stories. And he helped us a lot. He gave Heather a lot of training in gardening and so on. Nice. And so he was a local that really affected our early life. Then there was another fellow up the road, a little further up, who was a farmer and politician. He was a representative to the legislature, named Dick Bradley. And Dick Bradley had a big family, and we still have we are still good friends with his children. And he was a character.
It brings a smile to your face.
Yes, indeed. We had a problem with a bear. About the second year we were married, a bear came and it was an injured bear, and so it was late in the season. He should have been hibernating, but it came and killed one of our pigs. We had 3 pigs that Dick Bradley had given Heather, and it got into the pig pen and killed one of them, carried it off, and and the Fish and Game Department came and set a snare for it and finally trapped it. And well, no, I'm sorry. Dick Bradley had set traps for it, and the Fish and Game Department didn't like the traps. So they came and set a snare to try to catch it alive, but it failed. So they finally came and got hunters to track it down, and the bear came down out of the tree and was injuring the dog, so it was shot. So we got the bear. The Fish and Game people said, well, we'll probably be taking it down to the county farm and feed it to the inmates. And then he said, well, do you want it? And Heather said, oh, sure, yeah, I love it. So she took the bear. I ended up having to skin the bear, slaughter it, trim all the fat off the carcass. I got Dick Bradley's help. He showed me how to skin it, and we ended up taking it down to Saborn's store, where young Roy Saborn at the time helped Heather cut it up for meat. And we had bear steaks and we had bear burgers for some time, and it was very good. But it took a lot of work. But I thank Dick Bradley for helping me, and the Saborns for, so that was a big sort of event in our early, the bear skin is still on our railing upstairs. So.
It still is?
It's still there.
Oh my gosh, that's a great memory. That's a great memory.
Yeah.
Let's see. A new question always coming up. The more I get to know people, it's fun to design a question or two that's a little different. If we asked you 3 or 4 things that you're really, really passionate about, maybe we could ask the audience that after them listening to you today, what might those, and this is kind of a good summary too, what would those things be?
Well, obviously I've become addicted to building my luge. Which is a passion, and getting it better. But the other thing I think, and I haven't covered here, is rowing. Rowing has been a part of my life since I was 14 when I first learned. And after coaching and teaching, I got very frustrated that I couldn't row. And so we bought a boat. We had it delivered to a rowing show, a double. We had it delivered to a marina in Key West, Florida. And we started rowing it up the Keys, and in 2 weeks got up to Key Largo, which is at the upper end of the Keys. We had decided that if we were going to do this rowing trip, we should raise money for something. At the time, Heather was very interested in this hospital in Guayaquil, Ecuador, for lepers, Hansen's disease patients. She'd been down there on a Doctors Without Borders trip helping them. And so we raised money for it, and we, donations by the mile. And we managed to raise a couple $1,000s to give them. And then we decided, well, we really like to keep on going up the East Coast. And but we had noticed that the winds generally come north to south along the coast, not south to north. So we better try rowing it the other direction. So the second year we decided we'd start up in northern Florida, around Daytona, and row down the Florida coast down to which we did. But we decided we'd instead of taking a vacation, maybe Toto would sponsor this event. And yes, they were happy to do that. And so It wasn't necessarily a vacation for me, as it had been before. And we rode for 3 weeks from Daytona and got down to Key Largo again. And Toto donated plumbing fixtures, toilets and labs and everything to the Habitat for Humanity affiliates along the way. So every day we would call the next affiliate down the coast and say, we're coming. Would you by any chance have somebody that could meet us at the boat ramp where we will probably end and bring us back to the car so I could move the boat back down. And then we'll take you out for dinner and maybe give a little talk on water efficiency. And that format worked very well. Worked for them, worked for us. It was a mutually beneficial thing. Toto ended up giving, by the time we finished the trip in Ottawa, Canada, Toto had donated to Habitat for Humanity about $750,000 worth of plumbing fixtures. And we'd also raised another couple $100,000 in donations.
Incredible.
So it really, and the best of it was, we had had 8 wonderful vacations together, doing something together. And it was just the best part of our lives. So that's one of my biggest passions.
That's neat.
Skiing, of course, is another one. I taught skiing for 45 years. Loved it. Now I have grandchildren that are way more advanced in the skiing profession than I was. One of them is heads up the ski school at Cannon Mountain.
Nice.
And I've got grandchildren who are competitors. One was a junior national champion in freestyle when he was 14.
You have to be proud.
I'm very proud.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yep.
That's really great. Do you have our time is coming to a close pretty soon.
Yeah, I can
Yeah. Did you bring an artifact to share with us today?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my
meant
gosh.
To bring, I've got a picture of my 80th birthday celebration, which was a big surprise party.
You had no idea?
I had no idea. My daughter in Portland, Maine had rented a house on the beach in Scarborough, and I've got a picture of everybody, every child and their spouses, and they were all there, and I was totally surprised.
How many would that be? You have any idea?
There were probably 50 altogether.
Wow.
When we have a Christmas gathering, if everybody comes, we're 44.
That's a family. That's a family.
Yeah, it's definitely a family.
Yeah, it is. Gunnar, this has been really, really enjoyable.
I can bring you that picture.
And show it to them.
We'll
ask Andrew if he can somehow infuse it into the video.
I had it set out and I forgot it.
This man that remembers everything.
Yeah,
and then you forget that. We're going to yell at you. No, I want to thank you very much for your willingness, allowing me to come into your home, get to know your family just a little bit. My little trip in the luge, off season.
Well, you'll have to come in the winter.
It's a special place, there's no doubt about that. You've talked about it, where you sit to try to make decisions here and there. We all need that type of opportunity. Where can I go to make the decisions that are going to affect my family, our lives, etc.? Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience quickly before we say goodbye?
Well, a very quick one, because I'm a big believer in the healing powers of nature and being out in the woods. The day after 9/11, I had been in New York on 9/11, 10 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and saw horrible things happen. And it affected me greatly. And when I got back the next day, I went down to the brook, down to the pool where I had decided to buy that land. And I just sat there for 4 hours. And I credit, being there and being up, sitting in our little lean-to up above it that afternoon on the 12th of September, for keeping me from having post-traumatic stress syndrome. Because I had seen things which just I couldn't get out of my mind, and were horrible. And the power of being there in the woods by the river, and nature was around me, and I was still alive, and that has a huge potential for treating people who are exposed to horrors, veterans, whatever. And so I strongly urge people to come to the country.
I love it.
Be in the country.
There's 1 or 2 or 3 things that have happened in our lifetime that we know exactly where we were when something like this occurred. We'll never forget it. So if you have a place, to just go and listen to the water.
I go there
on
the
rocks.
12th of September every year.
Ours are rocks on the ocean. When we go to the ocean in January every year for 30 or 40 years, we sit down. It's our place for so many hours, and it is just so calm, and it puts everything in perspective. So a beautiful story for us to end with. Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Yeah. To our audience, thank you for joining us today. We'll be here next month with a husband and wife duo that have lived here. We would probably call them townies. Please remember why we're doing this is to preserve some of the stories of our communities. They are important. They truly are. It's our time to give back whenever you can. That came up so often today in your stories. Yeah. So until next time, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.